Good morning, everyone. Today, I want to explore a psychological phenomenon that quietly shapes how we value everything, from the furniture in our homes to the projects we champion at work. It's called the IKEA Effect, and once you see it, you'll notice it everywhere. The core idea is surprisingly simple. We fall in love with things we help create. By the end of this presentation, you'll understand the science behind this bias, the experiments that proved it, and most importantly, how to harness it or defend against it in your own decisions. So, let's dive in. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by defining exactly what the IKEA effect is and where it came from. Then we'll walk through the 3 landmark experiments that established it: IKEA boxes, origami, and Lego. After that, we'll dig into the psychology and neuroscience of why effort creates attachment. We'll examine when the effect holds and when it breaks down. And finally, we'll explore what all of this means for how you design products, lead teams, and evaluate your own ideas. Let me open with a provocative question. Would you pay 63% more for a piece of furniture you assembled yourself, even if it's identical to a pre-assembled version sitting right next to it? Most of us, rationally, would say no. But when researchers actually tested this, the answer was a resounding yes. Participants who built their own IKEA boxes were willing to pay nearly 2/3 more than those who simply inspected the same pre-assembled items. Their labor had literally changed how their brains valued the product. And this gap between rational valuation and emotional attachment is the IKEA effect in action. So what exactly is the IKEA effect? At its core, it's a cognitive bias where people assign disproportionately high value to products they partially created. The name, of course, comes from the Swedish furniture giant, whose entire business model is built on self-assembly. It was formally named and documented by Norton, Mocon, and Ariely in their 2012 paper, where they defined it as an increase in valuation of self-made products. Critically, this happens even when the self-made version is objectively no better and sometimes worse than a professionally made alternative. The IKEA effect sits alongside concepts like the sunk cost fallacy and the endowment effect, all part of a broader pattern showing that the effort we invest warps how we assess value. The story begins with 3 behavioral economists at top universities: Michael Norton at Harvard, Daniel Mocon at Tulane, and Dan Ariely at Duke, asked a deceptively simple question: does the act of creation change how we value what we've made? Their landmark paper, published in 2012, ran 4 experiments using everyday objects: IKEA storage boxes, origami figures, and Lego constructions. In every single experiment, the pattern held. People who built something valued it significantly more than people who merely observed the identical finished product. The paper's title captured it perfectly: The IKEA Effect, When Labor Leads to Love. Let's look at experiment 1, the one that started it all. Participants were divided into 2 groups: builders who assembled an IKEA storage box themselves and non-builders who inspected an identical pre-assembled box. Then both groups were asked, how much would you pay for this? On a 100-cent scale, builders were willing to pay 78 cents on average. Non-builders, just 48 cents. That's a 63% premium for the exact same box. And it wasn't just about money. Builders also rated their liking of the box at 3.8 out of 7, compared to 2.5 from non-builders, a 52% increase. Same product, dramatically different perception, all driven by the act of assembly. But the box experiment was just the beginning. In experiment 2, the researchers moved from utilitarian IKEA furniture to something more creative: origami. One group folded paper cranes and frogs themselves. The other group simply inspected the same creations. The result was staggering. Builders valued their origami creations 306% higher than non-builders did. The non-builders, in fact, saw the origami as nearly worthless, just crumpled paper. The builders saw art. This experiment revealed something crucial. The IKEA effect isn't just about furniture. It applies to anything we create with our own hands, even when the objective quality is, frankly, about the same as a child's craft project. Experiment 3 added a fascinating twist. This time, researchers used Lego sets and introduced 3 conditions. First, pre-built. Participants simply received completed sets. Second, build. They constructed their own and then placed bids. Third, and this is the clever part, unbilled. They built the set and then immediately took it apart before bidding. Look at the numbers. In the build condition, participants bid 84 cents on their own creation versus 42 cents on someone else's, a 42-cent gap. But in the unbilled condition, the gap shrank to just 14 cents. The lesson is profound. Completion is essential. If you build something and then destroy it, the magic vanishes. Effort without a finished product doesn't create lasting attachment. We've seen the evidence that the IKEA effect is real and powerful. Now let's turn to the deeper question. Why does it happen? What's going on inside our minds and our brains when we build something ourselves? The answer involves three interrelated psychological mechanisms, and recent neuroscience research is now backing them up with hard brain imaging data. Let's unpack each one. Let me walk through the three psychological drivers. First, effort justification, a classic cognitive dissonance mechanism. When we work hard on something, our brain needs to justify that effort, so it inflates the outcome's value. I suffered through this assembly, so it must be worth it. Second, competence signaling. Completing a task, especially one with instructions and visible results, tells us we're capable. The finished product becomes a trophy, tangible proof of our skill. Third, psychological ownership. The moment we start building something, we begin to feel it's ours. This taps into the endowment effect. We value things more simply because they belong to us. Together, these three forces create an emotional bond that objective quality simply can't override. And now, neuroscience is confirming what behavioral experiments suggested. A 2021 study used fNIRS, functional near-infrared spectroscopy, to watch the brain in real time as people evaluated DIY versus pre-made products. The findings were striking. Self-made products triggered significantly different hemodynamic responses in specific brain regions. In other words, the IKEA effect isn't just a quirk of survey answers. It has a measurable neural signature. Your brain literally processes something you built differently than something you just bought. This adds a whole new layer of credibility to the effect and opens up fascinating questions about how creation shapes cognition at the biological level. Of course, no psychological phenomenon is without its critics and caveats. On the left, let's look at when the IKEA effect reliably holds. Completion is essential. As the Lego Unbuild experiment showed, unfinished work doesn't count. The effect is stronger for hedonic, enjoyable tasks than purely utilitarian ones. And interestingly, when the self-made product is clearly and objectively inferior, the effect weakens. We're biased, but not delusional. On the right, the criticisms. Original sample sizes were modest at just 50 participants. Replication attempts have shown mixed results in some contexts. There's evidence of cultural variation. The effect may be weaker in non-Western cultures. And some researchers argue the IKEA effect is partly confounded with the sunk cost fallacy, making it hard to isolate. These are important nuances to keep in mind as we think about practical applications. Now let's move from the lab to the real world. Businesses have been quietly leveraging the IKEA effect for decades, long before Norton, Mocon, and Ariely gave it a name. Think about Nike by You. When you spend 20 minutes choosing colors and materials for a pair of sneakers, those shoes feel more yours than anything off the shelf. The same psychology powers Build-A-Bear, where children and adults pay a premium for the privilege of stuffing their own teddy bear. Meal kit companies like HelloFresh have built billion-dollar valuations on this very insight. The act of chopping vegetables and stirring a pan transforms a commodity meal into a personal achievement. But there's a cautionary tale here too. The IKEA effect bleeds directly into the sunk cost fallacy, that dangerous tendency to throw good money after bad simply because we've already invested effort. Managers defend failing projects, entrepreneurs refuse realistic valuations, and investors hold losing stocks, all because I built this. Understanding where the IKEA effect helps and where it hurts is the difference between smart strategy and self-deception. Let's bring this home. The IKEA effect is not some quirky footnote in a behavioral economics textbook. It's a fundamental feature of human psychology. Across every experiment we've examined, IKEA boxes, origami frogs, Lego sets, the pattern is remarkably consistent. We value what we build. The premium ranges from 63% to over 300%, depending on the product and the context. But here's the crucial nuance. Completion matters. Effort without a finished product, the half-built Lego set, the abandoned DIY project, yields no valuation bump. The satisfaction comes from seeing your work through. For organizations, the strategic implication is clear. Stop handing customers finished products and start inviting them into the creation process. Co-design, customization, participatory experiences, these aren't gimmicks. They're psychological levers that build genuine attachment. And for each of us as individuals, the IKEA Effect offers a deeper truth about the human condition. Meaning doesn't arrive prepackaged. We make it. Thank you.